By now, you've probably seen or heard of that controversial video of the Dalai Lama.
One of the world's best-known religious leaders is apologizing tonight.
The exchange involved a Tibetan spiritual leader kissing a young boy on the lips and asked the child to suck on his tongue.
Online backlash was swift with accusations of pedophilia and grooming.
Absolutely disturbing, inappropriate behavior by the Dalai Lama.
But today, thousands of Tibetans in Toronto are rallying for a second time because they want you to know that there's some context missing in that story.
There was no cultural context, no political context, no situational context of this event, but we had news channels, world media actually covering these short edited clips.
Instead of accusing him after seeing a 10-second video clip, go and educate yourselves.
As a Tibetan, I've seen how this controversy has been affecting my community.
He's very important for us. We thought he's not here, we can't do nothing. I'm so sad right now. I'm so sad.
So I wanted to find out more. Is there a deeper explanation for what's happening here? Let's dive into it. All right, let's start from the beginning. So back in late February, a graduation ceremony was held in Dharamsala, India with the Dalai Lama. A community development foundation called M3M ran the event, and a young boy attended it with his mother, who's the foundation's trustee. This boy got the chance to interact with the Dalai Lama throughout the day. At one point, they joked around together, he gave him a gift on stage, the Dalai Lama reflected on his childhood with him, and eventually, the boy asked the Dalai Lama for a hug.
I have a question. Can I hug you?
Afterwards, the boy and his mother gave media interviews saying how happy they were to have met the Dalai Lama.
We're totally blessed to have got these blessings from His Holiness. He came, addressed us in person, taught about peace that the world needs and how everyone needs to feel together like brother and sister.
I reached out to the foundation to get in touch with the boy's mother to see how the family feels about all of this, but I didn't hear back. The interaction happened in front of a large audience. It was broadcast live, but no one reacted at the time. And that might be because to Tibetans, nothing wrong actually happened here. The outrage only came over a month later, after a short clip of the interaction was posted on Twitter by a newly created account. Pemba Tsering, who's the president of the Tibetan government in exile, talked about the series of events.
We found that the initial instigators are pro-Chinese sources. Considering the scale and extent of the orchestrated smear campaign, the political angle of this incident cannot be ignored.
The CBC couldn't verify these claims. The Dalai Lama eventually issued an apology, but many Tibetans say he didn't do anything wrong.
You have to understand the context in the way this process unfolded, And certainly, when you look at the video we saw, actually, it only tells one moment in incident. But the day was a very long ritual process a day. So if you look at the other videos, there is a great sort of familiarity between the boy's family and the Dalai Lama. And there is the whole morning, there's whole ritual that the boy was doing some breaking coconuts and performing some ritual. It's very close throughout the day, and the family is very present.
Now you're going to hear the word context a lot. That's because it's the key to understanding this interaction. With the right context, Tibetans say that this interaction is simply an innocent grandfatherly exchange and not at all sexual. They say the Dalai Lama was actually playing a common traditional game that some Tibetan grandparents do to joke and gain affection from children.
When a grandparent is asked for almost everything, candy, chocolate, whatever they can give, they give you everything. They give you all their love. But there's a barter that happens before that. You're again here? Okay, come here, give me a kiss. And a kiss here. Now suck my tongue or eat my tongue. That phrase for us is not sexualized in any way because there's absolutely no way that, there's any sort of lust or conversation about desire or attachment in that picture.
And when you look at the whole video, he slaps him on the head. There's a degree of mocking from His Holiness. There is no sexual connotation in relationship between the boy and His Holiness.
The phrase in Tibetan is chele sa. It's an innocent tease which means eat my tongue. And while it might seem like the Dalai Lama is being exceptionally close with this boy, but laughing and joking isn't unusual for the Dalai Lama. He actually calls himself a professional laugher. And there are literally YouTube compilations of his sense of humor. Tibetans say that it's not uncommon for the Dalai Lama to be self-deprecating and jokey with non-Tibetans he first meets. I'm sure the image you have in your head is of a humorous, jolly monk.
His nature has always been unconventional. You'll see him on world stage. I think he had an interaction with Obama, and then he said, "Oh, you have big ears." You know, who would go up to the President of the United States and say, "Oh, you have big ears"? His Holiness is known for these unconventional interactions because he treats the President of the United States or a child or anyone the same.
Now, I want to explain something here. The Dalai Lama has never had what we think of as a normal social life. You'll notice all those clips and photos were with non-Tibetans, because that's usually the only time the Dalai Lama gets to be a little bit more lighthearted. When Tibetans interact with him, he's much more somber and serious. He takes on a different persona, being comfortable in his native language. Meetings are full of decorum and reverence, dating back to centuries-old etiquette when he's with Tibetans. So language and customs play a huge role in this interaction between the Dalai Lama and the boy. Traditionally, Tibetans didn't even hug as a loving social gesture. Lower status people would greet higher status people by sticking out their tongues. And the more intimate greeting, which is still used today, would be touching our foreheads, called an udu.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Also, English isn't the Dalai Lama's native language. He always has an interpreter, or in this case, two.
Can I hug you? It's a question.
So when he asked His Holiness, "Can I hug?" and His Holiness was very confused what was being said, because it startled His Holiness. Nobody has asked, "Can I hug you?" You know, that moment it has to be translated and explained to His Holiness what that meant.
And while most of the outrage seems to be around the verb suck, the Dalai Lama didn't even learn English until he was well into his 20s.
I think in English, there's a linguistic problem when the word suck has a huge sort of sexual connotation in contemporary world, and it's associated with oral sex and things. But within our community, and I don't think the Dalai Lama had inkling that the term has a huge sexual connotation, and that would be how people will read it, you know. So there is a conventional, like non-native speaker using an English word which does not fully aware of the connotation of the word in contemporary society also.
In other cultural contexts, especially in the West, I would say in America, I live here, I'm an American, it's very sexualized, isn't it? And it's almost like you are stuck in one way of understanding, like, oh my gosh, suck my tongue, right? That's all you are stuck, and you never think about multiple meanings and what it meant in the original Tibetan language.
That's Dr. Tenzin Dorji. He says a communications theory called expectancy violations theory could explain how people feel about the interaction.
So the kind of cultural assumptions and belief systems and practices, you know, they may violate each other's expectations, isn't it? Even simple things like that. In many Asian cultures, when you enter the house, you have to remove your shoes and go into the house. In many mainstream American cultures, you used to wear the shoes, go into the house, right? So it's not right or wrong, but when we look from each other's cultures, right, these things do not really seem to sit well. And so when those violations happen, according to the research studies, mostly the violations are perceived as negative.
And Dr. Tsering Shakya experienced this clash of cultures for himself.
In India, when we grew up, we all held hands with other men. We just walked on the street with my friends. But it was only when I came to West that the world saw this as a very sexualized relationship, same-sex relationship. So what people are seeing is what they want to see in that way. That is a misreading of incidents according to your own preconceived ideas.
And in the West, you could say we have our own preconceived ideas when it comes to religious figures and children.
And so what has happened at the end is that our traumas in the Western world, which, you know, I have utmost respect for because we live in a world that's so bad. We've had, you know, religious leaders, specifically in institutions, people in power, abuse that, specifically against children. And it's really unfortunate. But to project that worldview and that trauma that we have in our own Western context onto another culture, onto another event, where the boy, his parents, his holiness, the community is telling you that it was not that, we have no right to be doing that.
So what looks inappropriate through one cultural lens can be entirely innocent through another. So, does having more context change how you think about this interaction? One thing I know is that how you feel about it really matters. Tibetans I spoke with say this controversy has been an existential attack on their way of life, and they hope more people will take all of the context into account.